Cindy Sadrewski, and I'd like to welcome you to the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office 2025 National Patent Application Drafting Competition. And what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be talking about how to approach searching. All right. I've been working at the Patent Office for over 20 years now. I'm a contractor with the Patent Office. And in that capacity, I teach the patent examiners how to use the proprietary software that they will use when they are examining patent applications, searching for art, and submitting their correspondence to the applicant. If you have any questions, please go ahead and post them into the Q&A. Hopefully you can find the Q&A and you can post questions in there, and we may be answering them during the presentation, or if it needs an explanation, it may happen at the end of the presentation. But welcome. All right, so what are we going to be talking about? Why do you even want to search? What's the purpose of searching? All right, I'm assuming everybody has been on the internet, searching for, the best buy of something kind of thing. Well, searching for information about patents and patent applications may be a little bit differently. We're going to be talking about two approaches. We'll be talking about keyword searching and classification searching. And why, Cindy, would we want to have two ways? Well, I think of it as if you're going to go, let's say you need to go to the store. Well, if you drive to the store, all right, you may go one route, but if you end up taking, let's say, the public bus system to the store, they may go a different route. And by going that different route, you may see different buildings and houses and stuff as the bus goes a different route than you may go if you drove. And maybe as you're going on that bus route, you may go, oh, there's a restaurant that I didn't even know existed. We'll have to try that kind of thing. So it's a different way to approach getting to the same end, finding art, and find out what you're trying to invent. Does it already exist? And if it does, in what capacity does it exist, and how does your invention differ from what already exists? All right, that classification that I'm going to be talking about later on today is referred to as CPC, the Cooperative Patent Classification System. It's a system that's been around since about 2013, and it's a collaboration between the United States Patent Office and the European Patent Office, and I'll talk more about that. Then I'm going to show you a suggested 6-step process for you to conduct as you are trying to find, that prior art that exists to find out why your invention is new and novel. All right. And so we'll be showing you how to build that strategy using both keywords meaning text, as well as classification. All right, disclaimer, any kind of information that we use in this presentation, patent document numbers, patent application numbers, whatever it may be, is just for illustrative and educational purposes, and we are not endorsing any of the patents or patent applications that you may see referenced through this presentation. Okay, so what is a patent, and why does somebody even want to apply for one? Well, what it does, and we're going to be talking about US because it'll be just protection in the United States, and it gives the inventor the property right, okay, granted by the United States government, and it precludes others from making, using, offering for sale, or selling the invention throughout the United States or importing it into the United States. Now, if you are granted a patent, I can sell my rights to that patent to someone else, okay? But until I do that, I'm the owner and I'm the one that has the rights. It is for a limited amount of time, okay, depending. There are 3 kinds of patents. There is utility, meaning it does something. Design, let's say that you have some kind of stitching on your shirt or blouse, and unless that stitching does something like glow in the dark, So if it glows in the dark and you want to wear that, when you're walking at night, that would be utility. But if the stitching is just for design purposes, that's a design patent. And then we have plant patents for, like, you invent a new rose, or a camellia or something, or maybe vegetables or something, and working on improving that. So it'll only be for a limited amount of time, and by submitting your patent application, you are disclosing to the public your invention. All right. So they're needing to search. So for patentability, what your invention needs to be is new, useful, and non-obvious. So that, let's say that I'm inventing new ink, and let's say that the new ink is in plaid, kind of thing. You write, and ends up coming out in plaid. Well, the examiner that reviews my patent application may say, well, that's obvious that you could take something and make it plaid. I'm not saying that that is true, but I'm just saying that the examiner may look at what you're inventing and say, it's obvious that you could just make this little change, and that would preclude you from getting your patent, your application patented. In addition to being new, useful, and non-obvious, it also will need to be accompanied by a written description, which is basically your patent application. All right. So how do you know if your invention is new and not obvious? And that's why you need to do searching. You need to go out there and find out what exists already. What exists for ink or whatever it may be. And then how is your invention, your idea, new, useful, and non-obvious? Okay. And also it may help you as you are writing your patent application to know what's already out there so that you can focus on how yours is different. Okay, so learning what's out there, and then how does that make your idea, your invention, different from what already exists. All right, but it's also going to be searching. We're going to be focusing today on searching in patents and patent applications, but you're also going to want to be searching in what is called non-patent literature. What's non-patent literature? Something that's not a patent. It could be a website. It could be a journal article that's published. It could be a article that's in a magazine or whatever kind of thing. So anything that is not a patent or a patent application is considered non-patent literature. And you're going to want to do that kind of searching as well, because if it is in the public, and it's public knowledge, then that may preclude your invention. Okay, and again, as I say, it'll be a written disclosure. It'll be part of your patent application. All right, so examples of prior art. All right, well, because what we want to do is what is already out there, all right? Because I can't, I'm not going to say, oh, nobody's invented the shoelace before, and I'm going to do that. Well, I think if anybody has tied shoes before, they know shoelaces exist, but maybe your shoelace is different. It ties itself. I don't know, kind of thing. So, so we're going to be focusing today on U.S. patents and patent applications. And patent applications are published 18 months after filing. That is just the rule here in the United States. Patents are, when they're allowed, are issued every Tuesday and are published in the official Gazette. So, but patent applications are not made public until 18 months after filing. But you also may want to be searching, in foreign patents and foreign patent applications, journals, magazines, books, websites, conference proceedings. Maybe you've even presented, that idea at a conference. You will want to make sure that within that a certain time frame that you submit your patent applications or sign. But this is not an exhaustive list. This is just an example of what is considered prior art. All right, so prior art, again, definition: any document that contains a discussion or description relevant to the invention, all right, that you are seeking, all right? And so, and then a patent examiner who may reject one or more of your claims based on the fact that they say it's obvious, you know. So you may submit 10 claims and maybe they say claims 8 and 9 are obvious, and therefore, you know, they, in working with the patent examiner, may determine, oh, well, then we will just cancel perhaps claims 8 and 9 kind of thing. So it's going to be part of the patent examiner's job is to find out, is there any prior art out there based on what you're trying to claim that would preclude that particular claim in your patent application. All right. And as an applicant, it's your duty to submit to the office information that you have found in your searching. All right. And there's going to be a form called an information disclosure statement that, and what the purpose of that form is to allow you to provide in your patent application, what's the information, what documents have you found, what U.S. patents, what U.S. patent applications, what foreign patents or patent applications you found, as well as non-patent literature. So there's 3 sections to that IDS form: U.S. information, foreign information, and non-patent literature. Now, you may not find all 3, okay, but there's the ability for you to categorize if it's a U.S. reference, a foreign reference, or is it non-patent literature. All right. So when you're searching, you want to ensure that your invention, again, is indeed novel and non-obvious. Okay. And so again, that's why you're going to be doing that searching. And again, what you find in your results of searching may also help you clearly write how your invention is different than what already exists. Okay. And so doing that search, I talked about, you probably will do keyword. We all have words. We know how to search in words, kind of thing. And so you'll be doing that, and I will not discourage you from doing that. But there's going to be perhaps some pitfalls in words. If I say to you, I'm going to improve cell. Are you talking about a phone? Are you talking about biology? Something about the DNA cell? Are you talking about a prison cell? You know, and there may be some other cells that I can't think of. So kind of think about, as you're explaining to somebody, you know, how do you explain to what your invention? And as you explain that to somebody and they ask questions like, what kind of cell are you talking about? You know, think about what you say to them with the words you use to explain your application, and then what's their questions back that you need to clarify what your invention is, because that may help you build what are your key words as you're conducting your searching. And as I mentioned, we're going to be talking about classification searching, a different way to approach looking at prior art to find out what is out there. All right. So I'm going to encourage you, definitely will be doing text. You're going to be doing keyword, but I also want to encourage you to be doing classification. And you may say to me, Cindy, I don't know what the numbers are. I don't know what the classification even looks like. I'm going to show you how you can get what that information looks like, what those classification values, those numbers look like, so that you can use those when you're conducting searching. All right, so let's talk about keyword searching. All right, so text, kind of, you know, if you think of keyword, I'm talking text searching kind of thing. And so, you know, if some, you know, holidays are coming up, and I know one of my nieces will say, you know, she won't say, I want a toy. It's going to be, I want a doll, you know, and it may not just be a doll, you know, it may be a certain Barbie doll or whatever it may be. So, you know, if, you know, depending on, as you're doing a search, if you do a search on the word toy, is it a doll? Is it a truck? Is it a ball? Is it whatever kind of thing? So, you know, as you're conducting your search, you may want to, you know, coming up with those keywords that can be unique as to what is your invention about. Also, you know, obsolete words kind of thing. I've worked in the past with a patent examiner who was working on toilets. And you think everything about a toilet can be invented kind of thing, but, you know, apparently not. And so, you know, you can do the search toilet, but would you ever think of water closet kind of thing? And here in the US, we have rest stops kind of thing, and we call it rest stops. So, what should it be, something else kind of thing. So, how do I know what words to use, Cindy? As you are conducting your search and you put in your keywords, look at your results and see what words you're finding in the documents that you find. If you put in the word toilet, but then you say water closet, like, oh, that could be another term I could use, kind of thing. So just be aware, besides learning what's out there to improve how you write your what you're claiming, it also may help you to determine what keywords you need to use as you build your query. So mouse, all right. For whatever reason, one of my nieces wanted a mouse. Why? I have no idea. She had cats as well. But, if I said something to my mother, rest in peace, about, oh, Laura May is getting a mouse, she'd be thinking the animal, and Laura May be saying, oh no, I'm getting a new mouse because my mouse on my computer broke. So for my mother, the word mouse means an animal, means a rodent, but I'm assuming to most of you, except for unless you've got a mouse in your attic or garage or somewhere, the mouse, you probably think initially of a mouse as being that computer mouse that you use as you click and interact with the internet. Also, you want to have synonyms. Okay, we've got the word mouse, and if the mouse is talking about the rodent, you're going to want to have mouse or rodent or whatever kind of thing. So you need to think about synonyms, and where do you find synonyms? Well, you can go out with a thesaurus, and put in your term and see what words come back. As I mentioned, as you read documentation that you find, that may also give you some ideas of synonyms. All right, continuing about talking about what kind of keywords, we know that we spell the word color, with L-O-R. We know the British spell it O-L-O-U-R. Why do you care about how the British spell it? Because maybe the the art that you're looking for, maybe your competition is going to come from perhaps, either Canada or England or somewhere that has that alternate spelling. In the word tire, we spell it T-I-R-E, T-Y-R-E. When I did some traveling in England, and there was like no, was it livery? No, I forgot what, parking here. And I'm like, what's that? Well, it turns out it was a truck. Like, oh, okay. Also, my background is math, computer science. Spelling is not my best subject. And so, would I spell repellent A-N-T or E-N-T kind of thing? So you might want to be, aware that, how you type in a word, are you spelling it correctly? But did the applicant spell it correctly when they submitted their applications? And three-wheel bicycle, all right? Is it going to be called three wheels, tri-wheeled? Besides the word three, it might be the number three. Okay, so besides the word three, you might want to use the number three. Tricycle, all right? Is it hyphenated, not hyphenated? Is it one word kind of thing? And maybe big wheel, is a big wheel. Could that be, what the term is being used today? So just be aware that as you're talking about terms, not only how would you spell them, but how could they be written? The three as a word or three as a number. All right. And then if you also are going to be searching on acronyms, include the acronym LED, you would do LED or, perhaps in quotes, light emitting diode. All right. Or PDA, or personal digital assistant, because I know PDA can have other meanings as well, kind of thing. So I'm not saying don't use the acronym. I'm saying use the acronym, but also include what is the meaning of that acronym. And when we're doing synonyms, we're going to or those together. So we're going to say LED or light emitting diode or whatever. Okay. All right. And so again, the biggest challenge will be finding out what terms to use. It really is more difficult than you may think. All right. If you're doing text searching, all right, you can go as far back as 1880, and you may think that's pretty far back, which it is. And for U.S. patents, okay, there's a public search system available off of the USPTO.gov website, and I'll show you that a little bit later. And in doing so, you can go far as back text searching as 1830. Again, you may think that's pretty far back, and it is, but the Patent Office started in the 1790s, so there's about 40 years there that you can't go back to when you're doing text searching, where for classification, it can take you all the way back to the beginning, okay? And we'll talk more about what is the limitation of text searching besides just the time. Time meaning years. Okay, so what's a classification? All right, so you're familiar with the classification. You're familiar with, I'm assuming, the Dewey Decimal System. You go to a library or a bookstore. You go to the library and you say to the librarian, I want a book on travel. You know, the librarian's not going to say, oh yeah, there's stacks back there. I don't know where they are. They're just piled. Well, they're organized. You know, you've got fiction, nonfiction, travel, biographies, whatever it may be, whether it's in a library or in a bookstore, so that you can actually go and say, oh, here's travel, and it's not going to be, you know, mixed in with, you know, let's say fiction kind of thing. And so the Patent Office has a classification system, and as I mentioned earlier, it's the CPC, the Cooperative Patent Classification System. So just to be able to organize, and I can just sort of imagine Thomas Jefferson getting the first patent application comes in. Maybe it's about potash. It's like, okay. And the second one comes in and it's about the high top shoelaces. You know, do you put them on top of each other, or do you have separate stacks, you know, kind of thing? And so we have to have that organization even in the patent applications. All right, so starting in 2013, the Cooperative Patent Classification System was developed, as I mentioned, with the cooperation of the European Patent Office and the European Patent Office. I believe there probably was an idea that, you know, we're becoming a global society and maybe, you know, we need to coordinate the classification, because there is a classification system prior to 2013. And the U.S. had its own United States patent classification system, and it still is being used in design and plant patents that I talked about earlier. And it's still values you'll find on patents and patent applications, you know, 2013 and earlier. So so that information still exists, but you will find that the United States retrofitted patents and patent applications with also CPC values. And we'll talk more about that in a minute. All right, so CPC is broken into 8 categories, all right? And the first value will be a letter, you know, so is it something you're doing human necessities? And if it is, you'll find an A. Let's see, if you're doing chemistry, it'll start with a C. You know, if you're doing, oops, hold on here. If you're doing physics or something, it'll start with the value G. So there's going to be a letter and there's going to be a bunch of numbers after it, and we'll see one shortly. Okay. All right. So what's our 6-step process? So in our 6-step process, what we're doing, we're going to want to be emphasizing, number one, as I mentioned, we're going to be emphasizing searching for U.S. patents and U.S. patent applications. All right, and as I say, I'll show you the system that you can access from your own home, from your own computer, from the USPTO.gov. All right, so you can do that. And what you're going to be looking for, again, you know, is, you know, what's art out there, you know, similar to what you're inventing, to find out what's out there, to find out, like, oh, shoelaces have already been invented. Oh, you know, and self-tying is already invented. So, you know, I'm not going to go any further. Or, no, there's nobody done self-tying shoelaces, and therefore I can proceed. All right. And then as you're finding art, you're going to want to make, you know, a list, whether you have it online or in a piece of paper. What did you find? How was that relevant? What did you use to even find that document to say, okay, and what is it about? And how is your invention better, new, novel, non-obvious than what exists? So, and it's not going to be probably just a one-time shot of searching. You may search and then walk away, think about it and go, oh, I have another idea. And, and add that to your search. Or as you're explaining to somebody what you're inventing, they may ask a question of, I didn't think about. Yeah, so let me, add that perhaps term to see, is that something that I want to include as I am developing my idea? All right, so it won't be a one-time thing. Record what you found, date, times, and kind of information of what's important. All right, so our example is we're going to invent an umbrella that has a new rib design that limits the umbrella from collapsing or turning inside out. And one of my nieces was a valedictorian of her high school, very proud. And as a proud aunt, I was helping her to get from the car to the building, and it was raining that day, and I had an umbrella, and I was so excited that I opened up the umbrella and turned it inside out and catching the water and not keeping her dry. So my niece would have been really pleased if I had used an umbrella that would have not turned inside out. So step number one, because we talked about 6 steps. All right. So what is the purpose of the invention? Okay. Is it a utilitarian invention like the umbrella where I don't want it to collapse? Or is it that stitching that's on, that you're inventing, but it doesn't, doesn't have a function besides it just looks great? Just kind of FYI, and I don't know if you want to, pass this information on, but the characters from like Star Wars, like Yoda, as much as some people may want to think that Yoda is going to be protecting us or helping us, Yoda is an ornamental patent. All right. So then, what are you trying to invent? Are you inventing how it's made? So it's the process of making it, or it's just the product itself. It's just how he makes the umbrella. I don't care. I just want it so that it doesn't turn inside out kind of thing. So, if I make it of concrete, I doubt if it's going to turn inside out, and I doubt if it's going to blow away, but I doubt if I can pick it up. All right. So, what it's made of, is that what's important? How is it being used? And then what are the keywords and technical terms that describe that invention? Again, this may be more difficult than you think, all right? As I mentioned, you may want to consult a technical dictionary or thesaurus to come up with your terms and your synonyms. So based on this step 1, we'll apply it to our umbrella. Okay. So the purpose is our umbrella is to have that new rib design so we don't turn it inside out or it doesn't collapse. We're going to improve the umbrella so that you don't need to buy more umbrellas kind of thing and it doesn't blow away. And then what are the components of that umbrella that's going to be better? So we're going to have the framework for the ribs and maybe the stretchers, and how the rings are secured, maybe the fabric, that it's made of and kind of thing. And so the structure of the ribs are such that they can't turn the other way and things like that. So in this example, that's what we're going to be looking at and searching for. How is it used? Okay, to protect, but, umbrellas are not only just for protecting from rain, or even from snow, but it could be from the sun. All right. So based on that, there might be some other terms for umbrella. It might be called a parasol or a sunshade. Okay. And then for the wind, it could be windproof, wind resistant. Okay, so again, we have to think about the terms and then perhaps what are synonyms. So we come up with our idea of umbrella, parasol, sunshade, maybe bumbershoot. If it's something that we're going to try, to look at something maybe come from England or whatever. So the umbrella, parasol, and sunshade, and is this example, you're going to or those. So the operator between these terms are going to be or. The operators between windproof and wind resistant, again, are going to be or. Windproof or wind resistant. And is wind resistant one word, two words? Is windproof one word or two words kind of thing? And you may spell it as one word, but that doesn't mean how everybody else spells it. So you may need to consider that it could be two words. Then what we're going to do is we're going to take that concept. We've got two concepts. One is the umbrella and its synonyms, and the other is windproof and those synonyms, and we are going to and those two concepts together. Okay, we got concepts, so we're going to and concepts together, but ors between the synonyms. And we're going to find that, you know, generally you can do an and, but there's going to be other operators that we can use when we're searching in the U.S. patent search system, because maybe we want the relationship not just to be and, we don't want them just to be in that document, but we might have them close together. You know, maybe they need to be in the same paragraph kind of thing. And so we can show you that instead of using and, we can use another operator, all right? You know, and that operator would be same. All right, so steps 2 and 3 is going to be not only coming up with those terms, but also classification. What are the classification values? All right, and what can they be? And Cindy, I don't know those, and I'm going to show you a couple of different ways to know what classification values should you be using. And I encourage you to do text by itself, classification by itself, and then you can merge text and classification together. But I'm going to suggest that you also do them separate before you merge them together. And the reason is that by merging them together, there's the ability to limit how far back you can be in getting result sets. And we'll talk more about that. But do text by itself, class by itself, and then you can also merge text and class together. All right, so on the uspto.gov site, all right, and I will go live a little bit later, is that you're going to go uspto.gov, and then you're going to do is a find it fast, and when you expand find it fast, there is a classification entry that you could click on, okay? So you would click on there, and you would get this classification window. Okay, and then in this classification, when you have some options, do you want to put in a CPC value because maybe that's what somebody gave you, or do you want to put in a term? And in this example, putting in the term umbrella. All right, and then we would hit the search button, and we come back with a list of all of the CPC values that have the word umbrella in them. All right, but we probably wanted to go with one where the main title has the word umbrella in it. So we'll click on this link, and we come into the link about the walking sticks and umbrellas. All right, and then what we might want to do is then start scrolling down through to find out not only umbrellas, but we also, our other concept is windproof or wind resistant. So we can be, you know, scrolling down to do that. So as we scroll down, we eventually come up with this definition of this CPC value, A45B. So here's our A, our very first letter, okay? 45B 25/22. So this is the category, 45 is the class, B is a subclass, 25 is the main group, and 22 is the subgroup. Notice it's showing to you here in this example with a space between the B and the 25. You're going to see that when you actually type in this CPC value, there will be no spaces. It'll be A45B 25/22. There will be no spacing, okay? That's just for readability here. And if you find a D, okay, in front of this particular CPC value, there is a D. Well, notice above there is not a D. So not every CPC value has a D. But if it has a D, it means that there's a definition. So there's more information perhaps that you may find out about this particular CPC value. So if we click on the D, all right, and so what we're looking for is we find out that perhaps here it's showing, you know, a picture and it's showing about, you know, perhaps how it's doing the, you know, providing that support of wind resistance kind of thing. And so they say not every CPC value has a definition. And if it does, you may want to look at it to see, does it give you more information, and what information does it provide you? And maybe also it may give you some additional words. Maybe you're going to put in the word resistance, perhaps, in your search. All right. And then, as I mentioned, so step number 4, to do a CPC search, okay, just with the CPC values, again, can be used against U.S. patents and U.S. patent applications, and it also can be used in the European Patent Office if you do a search in the European Patent Office as well. All right, so how do we get to the search system that I've been referring to? Again, uspto.gov. Under Find It Fast, okay, there is going to be a patent public search system, and you're going to get this window, and we're going to go to the advanced. The public, the basics search system is not going to give you, you can do it, it's not going to give you the granularity that you can have with the advanced search system. All right, and this advanced search system is exactly the system that examiners use within the patent office. All right, the version that the examiners use within the patent office has a little more bells and whistles in it than the public system that you have access to, but it's going to be using the exact same operators, and the databases that are available for you in the public is going to be the databases that the examiners use. But again, the internal version within the patent office has more databases than the one we're going to use publicly, but at least gives you that system that the examiners will be using. And so when you come in, there's going to be this layout. And the layout that I like to use is if you come to the top right, is the advanced or the enhanced search system. And the reason why I like that, all right, is because you get a little different layout. And it may not look different from the one that we just came from, but we will see that it's a little bit different when I go ahead and use it. This example is not using the advanced system layout, search layout, but I will show you that because I like it a little bit better. But still, in this example, we've put in the A45B25/22, no space, right? .cpc . I'm saying that I only want to search in the .cpc field. All right, we call this an index, and we only want to search in this index. So when you're doing CPC, I encourage you to do .cpc after it. It's a dot before and a dot after. All right, and when you do that, you're going to get, we got some results here. Here in this example, we got 444 results came back. This is documents that came back. We're seeing one of the documents here to the right, and we're seeing the text version of this particular, and I know it's a patent application. I can just tell by the number itself. All right, and we'll show in a little bit how we can actually determine if it's a patent application or a patent. And here is that CPC value that we typed. And notice again, it's being displayed with spacing, but we typed without spaces. All right, and this is what we can get our results at. All right, and we're seeing that we're getting U.S. patent applications. And if you look, and let me focus on right here for a moment. All right, notice that I can look at these numbers, I can look at just by itself, noting that these first 6 are patent applications, and this is a patent. Can you see, just looking at the difference, a patent application will have a 4-digit year and then a 7-digit number after that. And I can tell by just alone that this is a U.S. patent and not a patent application, all right? And you see these +1s in front in this column. If we expand it, which I can do a little bit later, it probably will show you one of the results could be, here's the patent application, and if it was allowed, the corresponding patent number, okay? All right, and so once you have found results, in the U.S. patent searching, you might want to look at the first page of a patent, patent, and it's going to give you lots of information. And one of them is going to be what other art was cited in finding this and allowing this particular patent. Okay, and I'll show you that in a minute. But the patent or a patent application is broken into pieces, all right? There's sections, there's a drawing section, specification section, the claims are at the very end of a patent or a patent application. So you may want to focus on, where, what do you want to look at? Is your art very visible? If I'm talking about, rib design on a umbrella, I might, just looking at the drawings may provide me that, yeah, this is about it. But if you're dealing with, let's say, software development and your idea is improving some kind of a software system, I was a programmer in a prior life, and I know one flow chart and the next flow chart looks pretty similar. So looking at the flow charts themselves may not provide like, oh, this is the one, because you flow in, flow out, decisions made, kind of thing. So, if your art has to do with software development, looking at drawings may not be as helpful as if your art has something that's very visual. Let's see here. Again, you're going to want to record what patents and patent applications you found, and again, you're going to be probably searching maybe a little bit now and come back a day later, or you talk to somebody or you find some information. It's like, oh, I need to improve my searching, because maybe you do your search and you get 3,000 documents back, and I'm going, oh, I don't want to look at 3,000 documents. Well, maybe you need to refine, those 3,000 documents and add another term to it to say, oh, let's get it down to perhaps a few hundred. So again, it's probably not going to be a one-time search, and you will probably do it perhaps over a course of a few days or weeks. All right, so I talked about that when you find that art that really is about your invention, all right, I think about like going fishing. You go out, you get your tackle box and your fishing gear, and you go out to, the stream or a lake, and you go fishing, and no bites. We're not going to get lunch or dinner today. So you move up and down the stream or a different part of the lake, and you start fishing, and you go, fish, good size, fish, good size. All right, so you're in the right area. You're in the right area of the stream, or you're in the right area of the lake. You're in the right area of your art. So in my opinion, when you're in the right area of your art, you can do two things. One thing is a citation search. All right, I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. All right. So I'm on a patent, okay? And there is what we call, come back here a minute. Let me come down here for a minute. This is called field 56. On the front of a patent, there's a field 56, and it's called referenced cited. This is the information that you, as an applicant, found, that you put in your IDS, and this will be as the examiner found when they did their searching to say, this is the art that we found about your area, your idea. But guess what? None of these are, include what your new idea is. So what you want to do is, when you find those documents that are that are in your art area, you may want to conduct hold on here. You may want to conduct a citation search. Cindy, how do I do that? I will show you. There's going to be a button when we get into the system, that there is a button. But anyway, so this is not only showing that it's here on the front page, but it could go over onto a second page. And what we've got here is I've got patents and patent applications that are US cited, but it could be foreign, and it could be also non-patent literature that is on the front page or may continue on to perhaps the second page. All right. And while I'm here, in field, let's see what document number we're looking at. Here we're looking at 2014. And I'm looking at the image of this patent, and I'm seeing a US value, but I'm not seeing CPC values. Okay, so 2014, 2013, 2014 is when CPC values were starting to be applied, but have not maybe applied for this particular patent application or patent. And so I'm going to show you that when we look at the text behind this image, we will see CPC values. Okay. All right, so broadening your search, you're going to want to perhaps go this eSpaceNet talks about the European Patent Office and go in looking at their system to find, what ideas are there in the European patent system. Again, non-patent literature, journals, documents, conference proceedings, whatever it may be, websites even, okay? Again, in websites trying to find a date. When was that idea made public? All right, so these are some examples, the search for patents. I'm going to show you the public search site in a minute, and then also external sites, that CPC and how to find those values, Google Patents, European Patent Office, and things like that. So, so what I want to do here, and then also there is a Patent and Trademark Resource Center, PTRCs. They're going to be made up of, and I'm here in Colorado, so the Denver Patent Office is what I'm associated with. But there also can be libraries. So, the public library in your area might be the ability for you to go in and perhaps and conduct some searching. But, in my opinion, you don't really even need to go there unless you've got questions, is that you can, actually sit with your own computer and do that searching from uspto.gov. All right. There is also a series that the Patent Office offers called Path to Patent that talks about patent applications, searching. I also talk about searching in that series, and then how to submit your patent application as it goes through the process. So you may want to look into perhaps attending one of those series that I've made available to the public. Okay, so we talked about searching, keyword, classification, CPC, and the 6 steps. So what I want to do here is, before I go live, if you could please, if you take your cell phone, go ahead and capture this QR code, because what this is it's going to take you to a survey so that you can evaluate this presentation. Did it provide you information? Was it helpful? How can we improve the presentation, etc.? So we encourage you to go ahead and take a picture of this QR code. All right, and so while you're doing that, I'm going to go ahead and bring over the uspto.gov site. And let me just make this a little bit bigger. And if you need that QR code a little bit later, I will give that to you in a little bit later. So I'm live, all right, uspto.gov, find it fast, and I'm going to go to the search part, okay? So I'm going to go to the public search, click on that link. I want to go to the advanced search aspect. All right, and I'm going to, when it does populate, I'm going to come over here to the advanced layout, and I'll show you why I like it better. It's the same information, just laid out a little bit differently. All right, I've got my search window, and I'm going to go ahead and put a search in. You do not want to watch me type, because typing is not my best skill, but I'm a good copy paster. All right, so we got databases over here. There's 3. The USPG pubs are patent applications, then the US patents, and the US OCR. The OCR stands for optical character recognition, and that's going to allow for you to do a text search for against patents, US patents that were issued prior to 1971. All right. So you're going to want to have all of these. So the first one are applications. If a patent application is allowed, the patent application stays in the PG pub, and then there'll be an entry in the US PAT. And the OCR, again, is allowing you to do text searching earlier than 1971. 71. So let me go ahead and do that search. I'm going to conduct that search, and I'm going to get some windows populated. Here I'm coming back with 445 documents that have come back. All right, here I got my search results, and here's a list of documents that have come back. Okay, over on the right-hand side, I'm looking at the image of this, and happens to be a PG pub, all right, patent application. And if I scroll down, here are the CPC values, and here's that CPC value that I put in, that A45B 25// CPC, and here's that value, kinds of things. And so there's a toggle under the document viewer, and I can click on that toggle, and now I can actually, I'm going to make this window just so that you can see it a little bit better. And so here's the image of the patent application that we are examining. Okay, so the image is the official document that's printed in the official Gazette. All right, and notice here that I've got, let's see here, we're looking at a patent application. We don't have field 56. Whoops. So we can't do a backward citation search on it, but we can do what's called a forward, and I'll show you that in a minute. So let me show you one that's a patent. So here we're looking at the patent, and notice I do have a field 56. All right, and here, sorry, here is the U.S. patents. Here's some PG pubs. Here's a foreign patent that was cited. In this example, I don't have any non-patent literature that was cited, but we've got foreign and U.S. patents and patent applications that are cited. And this was issued in 2023, just recently. Patents are published every Tuesday. And so we've got CPC values. We have CPC values. And somewhere in here, here's my A45B 25/22. Sorry, pops up here and I wanted to do that. After the CPC value, you see a date. Don't worry about the date. That date is just when the CPC value was created. So don't worry about any date values that are after a CPC value. Don't worry about it. But this is where you can say, okay, Cindy, I'm finding the art I like, all right? So I can do a citation search, and how do I do that? On my document viewer, I'm on the image, and there are exclamation points. And if I do hover the first one, it's a backward, which means it's going to look at all of these documents that were cited on the front of this particular patent. Or I can do a forward, and there probably would not be any because, well, it's a year old, so it could be kind of thing. And so if I do a backward one, it's going to go ahead and it's going to give me those 9 documents that were cited. And it's only going to be U.S. patents or patent applications. And then you may want to look at these and say, okay, is this, giving me more in depth, another, vantage point of what I'm trying to search for, a different avenue. So let me come back to where it came from, and let me come back to here. If I click on the query, it'll take me back to where it came from. All right, and so, but when you're doing a search, you're doing a search against the text, which is the database behind the image. So let me do I'm going to do another search. So hold on, let me just copy this query. All right, let me do a copy. All right. Let me clear my entry, all the same databases. I'm going to paste this query in. So notice I've got an umbrella. The asterisk, what's that mean? It's allowing wildcards. We've got the OR operator in between my synonyms and I've got parentheses. I was a math major, so I like grouping with parentheses. And then I'm doing the and operator. And then I don't have, maybe I want to have an asterisk. So it'd be windproof, windproofing maybe. I should do that as well. Kind of thing here. I've got wind resistant. All right, because notice that I'm going to find plurals and also British equivalents. So it's not going to find the bumbershoot, but, if there was a spelling like color, it would find also the OUR result. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and click search button, and I get 317 documents back. All right, and D means it's a design patent. All right, so here I've got a design patent. And I'm going to make this window a little bit wider, and I'm going to come down, and I want to find a document that's a little bit older to show you something. Okay, here is a patent that was issued in 2013. Let me do 2012 just to make sure. So here's a patent that was issued in 2012. We're looking at the image, and notice I've got CPC values, and I've also got my words, that in my query, and I scroll down, and, here's where they all exist. So it's like, they're all lots of places, all right? But if I go to the image, all right, I've got CPC values, I got US values, but if I go to the image, I'll make this bigger. Now, hold on here. There we go. If I look, I'm not finding CPC values on the image, Cindy. All right, I'm seeing the US values, I'm looking here in field 52 is where I'm looking for. I see US values, but not CPC. So I mentioned to you, they retrofitted. They did not reprint the images, but the database behind, they retrofitted, and now we're finding CPC values. So if you look at an image of a document that you like, and you're not seeing CPC values, it's a toggle. Go to the image or go to the text behind it, and that's where the CPC values are. And then here you can find what CPC values, should I be using. And the ones that you find that probably are repeated often enough in the different documents that you like might give you a clue as to what CPC values to use, okay? Cindy, I don't know all of the terminology. I don't know all the operators. There is a help. All right, so when I click on help, I'm going to scroll down. There is a link to the Boolean and proximity operators. So if I click on that link, so we're familiar with and, or, not, or XOR. But if I come down here, here's proximity operators, meaning that if you wanted to have umbrella and you wanted to have that concept of wind resistance somewhat close to each other, instead of just using and, I had talked about using same. I want it to be in those terms in the same sentence. In the same paragraph. Because if I do and, they could talk about umbrellas on page 1 and windproof on page 97. So then there might be a relationship, and that's what proximity operators are about. If I scroll down a little bit, maybe it's up. What I'm looking for is the wildcards. Here we go. Wildcards. On the question mark, it requires a character, where if I use an asterisk or a $, where I use the asterisk above, it's going to be looking for umbrella, singular, plural. If I did it with windproof, let me add the asterisk to windproof. Okay. Oh, we didn't put it in there. Hold on. And do that search. I got more documents, and notice that in my results set, I've got windproof, and if I click hit terms, what else did I get under windproof? Come down. Down. So we've got windproofing, proofness, kinds of things. So by adding that asterisk, I actually got a different endings to windproof. All right. So I know we're running out of time, but I hope that, and we did that citation search on a on a patent, and this is design, I can do that. I have to be on the image, is where I get my forward and backward citation searching. All right. So this was just issued. Design patent just issued, I guess tomorrow or today, kind of thing. So, so I know we're running out of time. I appreciate your time and attention today. I don't know if we have any questions or anything that I need to address. But if not, thank you very much. Let me bring back up that QR code so for the survey. So do we have any questions from anybody that I need to address, or are we are we done?
Cindy, there
Yes,
are no
ma'am.
questions in the chat right this minute. Was there about to be a question?
For me?
Yeah, I was just asking.
Yeah,
Currently,
I don't have anything. I don't know of any.
we're not seeing anything. There were some questions in the chat. One was, will this presentation will be sent to participants? And we answered that the recording will be posted in ZFairs. And
Okay.
there was a request for the captioning link. Hopefully the person who asked got it. And there is a comment saying, thank you very much. This was very helpful. And I think the person who sent in that statement was speaking on behalf of many people. So thank you very much, Cindy. And
I hope so too. Thank you very much. And have a wonderful time searching. It is fun. Just let your mind wander and figure out terms, kind of thing. All right. Take care and have fun.
Yeah,
Good luck.
and there was just one more question. It was any idea when the invention statement will be released, and we plan to release it early next week.
Okay. All righty. Thank you very much. Bye, folks.